There exists a mansion in the heart of Windsor Park that few cameras have ever captured. 30 rooms, gardens stretching across acres, a history spanning 3 centuries, and at the center of it all, a prince who refuses to leave. This is not the story of Buckingham or Windsor Castle. This is the story of Royal Lodge, the residence that has become the epicenter of a family battle between King Charles III and his brother, Prince Andrew. A property valued in the millions that no one can buy, but someone must maintain. Behind its stone walls and Georgian windows, Royal Lodge harbors secrets of the British royalty that go far beyond today's headlines. From the Queen Mother to the royal mistresses of the 18th century, this place has been a silent witness to the most private moments of the world's most public family. Today we will uncover why this mansion, which few know and even fewer have visited, has become the symbol of a monarchy in transformation. Welcome to the story the Windsors prefer to keep in the shadows of Windsor Great Park. If you enjoy deep explorations into the forgotten mansions and families, please support this documentary by liking and subscribing. And if you have your own insights or stories about these estates, I'd love to read them. Now let's step inside. The land remembers everything. In 1662, a modest brick lodge stands where Royal Lodge now commands the landscape. Lower Lodge, they call it, distinguished from the Great Lodge, later Cumberland Lodge, that rises half a mile north. Nothing grand about it. Queen Anne style, functional, honest, the kind of structure built for purpose, not prestige. Rangers live here, superintendents of the great park, men who manage the monarch's hunting grounds, who know every deer path through Windsor's forests, who understand the rhythms of a landscape that's belonged to the crown since William the Conqueror claimed it in the 11th century. By 1750, the lodge houses Thomas Sandby, military topographer, artist, deputy ranger of Windsor Great Park, a skilled man trained in precision, in capturing landscapes on paper with scientific accuracy. His brother Paul, the more famous Sandby, will create the magnificent artificial Lake Virginia water. But Thomas lives quietly in the brick house, his artistic eye perhaps the first to see past its utilitarian exterior to something more. The dairy sits adjacent. Cows graze where armed guards now patrol. Milk churns where helicopters land. It's pastoral, simple, the kind of English countryside that poets will later romanticize when it's mostly vanished. Nothing royal about it. Not yet. Then comes 1812 and everything changes. George, Prince of Wales, needs temporary lodging. Not for himself as future king, not yet, but because Cumberland Lodge requires extensive reconstruction. He moves into the modest brick house in Windsor Great Park as a practical solution to a temporary problem. But when a prince moves in, nothing stays modest. Enter John. Nash. Born 1752, probably in Lambeth. 60 years old when he receives this commission, already legendary. The man who designed Regent's Park, Regent Street, the Royal Pavilion at Brighton. The architect who transformed London's West End through what contemporaries call metropolitan improvements, a phrase that barely captures the ambition. Nash sees possibilities in the simple brick structure. The cottage ornate style is sweeping through aristocratic England, romantic rusticity, the fantasy of rural simplicity combined with luxury, thatched roofs that cost more than slate, verandas that frame calculated views, a symmetry presented as natural, though every line is measured, every post positioned for maximum picturesqueness. Nash transforms Lower Lodge into Prince Regent's cottage. He adds sweeping verandas, a thatched roof that undulates like the surrounding hills, a conservatory that seems to grow from the landscape. Tree trunks stripped of bark support the overhanging eaves. Windows are positioned not for symmetry, but for views, of ancient oaks, of meadows, of the Great Walk stretching toward Windsor Castle 3 miles north. It becomes known as the most important of all cottages ornates, a cottage in name only, large, elaborate, expensive beyond measure. The Prince Regent moves in officially in 1815. Cumberland Lodge renovations? Abandoned. He prefers this fantasy, this make-believe simplicity that requires a staff of dozens to maintain. By 1820, additions multiply. The cottage grows. More rooms, more verandas, more carefully orchestrated rusticity. In 1823, Geoffrey Wyatt, later Sir Geoffrey Wyatville, architect of Windsor Castle's Gothic revival, succeeds Nash. He expands further, adds the Royal Chapel of All Saints in 1825 because the existing chapel proves too small for the royal household. The house acquires a new name in the late 1820s, Royal Lodge. Notice the pattern. A simple structure transformed through architectural ambition into something that costs exponentially more to maintain than to build. Beauty layered upon beauty until the machinery required to sustain it becomes invisible, essential, and ruinously expensive. In 1830, George IV dies. His brother William IV ascends the throne. William IV takes one look at Royal Lodge and sees waste, extravagance, the kind of self-indulgent excess that gives monarchy a bad name. Nash's romantic cottage, with its thatched roofs and elaborate pretensions, strikes him as absurd. His response is decisive. Demolish it. Almost all of it. The entire elaborate structure comes down. Workers tear away Nash's verandas, strip the thatched roof, dismantle the fantasy. Almost all of it. William IV spares the conservatory. That elegant glass structure survives, an artifact of Nash's vision. Around it, a new building rises, stucco-fronted. 3 stories. Georgian formality replaces romantic rusticity. The architecture of reason supersedes the architecture of sentiment. From 1840 onward, the rebuilt Royal Lodge serves as grace and favor accommodation, properties the monarch grants to servants, officers of the royal household, and those in favor. Various occupants flow through over decades. It's functional, useful, but no longer carries the romantic cachet of Nash's vision. Then comes 1931 and Royal Lodge transforms again. King George V grants Royal Lodge to his second son, Prince Albert, Duke of York, and his wife Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, Duchess of York. They're overjoyed. London is formal, restrictive, heavy with protocol. Royal Lodge offers something else: privacy, space, the possibility of raising their 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, in relative freedom. The Duke and Duchess hire architect Sir Eric Saville to renovate and expand. Wings are added to either flank of the Georgian structure. The grounds, those 98 acres of Windsor parkland, are transformed under Elizabeth's vision. She loves gardens. Under her direction, Royal Lodge becomes a living landscape. Roses, wildflowers, manicured lawns, transitioning to wild meadow, paths that wind through ancient trees. The work is careful, expensive, and full of love. In 1932, the people of Wales gift 6-year-old Princess Elizabeth a miniature cottage, Y Bothan Bach, Little Cottage in Welsh. Architect Edmund Wilmot designs it at 1/6 scale, 5-foot ceilings across 2 stories, thatched roof, working kitchen, bedroom upstairs, even a tiny telephone. It's transported from Wales on the back of a lorry, catches fire during transport, returns to Wales for repairs, and finally reaches Royal Lodge intact. Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret spend hours there, playing house, hosting tea parties, creating the kind of childhood memories that last lifetimes. For young Elizabeth, who will one day reign for 70 years as Queen Elizabeth II, Royal Lodge represents something precious, a place where she's simply a child, not the heir, not weighed down by destiny. She and Margaret ride ponies across Windsor Great Park. They explore the grounds with their dogs. Their parents shield them here from the relentless scrutiny that defines royal life. This is what Royal Lodge becomes under George VI and Elizabeth. A genuine home, not a showpiece, not a display of power. A place where a family lives, loves, grows. The house holds this warmth through the 1930s. Even when Edward VIII abdicates in December 1936, dramatically taking his leave from the family at Royal Lodge before departing into exile, the house remains a sanctuary. September 1939. Britain enters World War II. Windsor Castle becomes the primary royal residence during the war years. Its stone walls, its fortified position, its proximity to London make it strategically sound. The princesses remain there, relatively safe, while bombs fall on London and cities across Britain. But Royal Lodge doesn't disappear from their lives. It remains a refuge. Queen Elizabeth, now Queen Consort after George VI's unexpected coronation, uses it as a weekend retreat. The princesses study there, practice their radio addresses, maintain some semblance of normalcy while the world burns. The house nestled in Windsor Great Park represents continuity, British determination, the idea that even in wartime certain things must be preserved: family, tradition, the quiet dignity of carrying on. No bombs fall here, no direct damage. Royal Lodge sits through the war years untouched, a pocket of peace in a continent at war. When George VI dies unexpectedly in February 1952, his health destroyed by the stress of wartime leadership and decades of heavy smoking, Princess Elizabeth becomes Queen Elizabeth II at age 25. And her mother, now Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, makes Royal Lodge her primary Windsor residence. From 1952 until 2002, Royal Lodge belongs to one woman, 50 years, the longest any royal has ever called this house home. The Queen Mother transforms it into something extraordinary, not through massive renovations or architectural additions, but through spirit, through the kind of hospitality that makes a house feel alive. The gardens flourish under her care. Roses bloom in careful beds. Wildflowers spread across meadows. The grounds become legendary, a living testament to her love of natural beauty carefully cultivated. Inside, the house glows with warmth. She fills rooms with art selected from Windsor Castle's storage. Furniture from Buckingham Palace finds new life here. Nothing ostentatious, everything chosen for comfort, for beauty, for the pleasure of living well. And she entertains. Politicians, artists, close friends, all receive invitations to Royal Lodge. Tea parties on the lawn, picnics near Weibothenbach, dinners where laughter fills rooms that have known centuries of royal formality. Her grandchildren visit regularly. Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, all spend time at Royal Lodge during their childhoods. For them, it's a place where their formidable grandmother is simply Gran, where rules are softer, where childhood can happen without constant supervision. Prince Andrew, particularly, develops a deep connection to Royal Lodge. He's born in 1960, the Queen Mother's first grandson. She adores him, indulges him, allows him freedoms his older siblings never experienced. He grows up knowing these rooms, these gardens, this landscape as intimately as any place on earth. The Queen Mother's spirit makes Royal Lodge what historian records describe as both elegant and comforting, royal yet homely, an almost impossible balance, but she achieves it through sheer force of personality and decades of patient care. She lives there until the very end. On March 30th, 2002, Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother dies at Royal Lodge in her sleep. She's 101 years old. Her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, is at her bedside. It's peaceful, the kind of ending people hope for after a century of life. But her death leaves a question. What happens to Royal Lodge now? 5 months after the Queen Mother's death, Prince Andrew, Duke of York, approaches the Crown Estate with a proposal. He wants Royal Lodge. Not to rent casually, not as temporary accommodation. He wants a long-term lease. Security. The guarantee that this house, where he spent so much of his childhood, where his grandmother created her sanctuary, will be his. The Crown Estate, the independent business entity that manages royal properties, faces an unusual situation. Royal Lodge sits deep within Windsor Great Park, 3 miles from Windsor Castle. Proximity to the monarch creates security complications. Opening the property to the general market seems impossible, so they negotiate with Prince Andrew. The terms are extraordinary. In August 2003, Andrew signs a 75-year lease. It expires June 15, 2078. He's 43 years old. The lease extends until he's 118. Past any reasonable life expectancy, it's designed to be effectively permanent. The upfront payment, £1 million. But that's only the beginning. The lease requires Andrew to undertake extensive refurbishments at his own expense. The estimated cost in September 2002 prices, £7.5 million, excluding VAT. In return, Andrew pays nominal rent. The lease operates as a peppercorn lease. Rent is due only when the Crown Estate formally requests it, which they rarely do. It's been reported at £260,000 annually, but Andrew has reportedly never paid actual rent in 20 years of occupancy. There's a catch, though, a clause. If Andrew surrenders the lease before 20,000 Wartime, during 2028, the Crown Estate must pay him £185,865 annually until that date. The National Audit Office reviews the arrangement. Their independent advisors note the refurbishment would cost at least £5 million and suggest Andrew should have the option to buy out the notional rent for £2.5 million. Once Andrew commits to spending $7.5 million on renovations, they decide no rent is required. He's effectively paying through his refurbishment costs. The Crown Estate justifies the arrangement. They cite security concerns. The need to maintain control over a property so close to Windsor Castle and the Royal Chapel of All Saints. The impracticality of offering it on the open market. What they create, whether intentionally or not, is a fortress, a legal structure that makes removing Andrew from Royal Lodge extraordinarily difficult. The 75-year lease isn't a grace and favor arrangement subject to the monarch's whim. It's a binding contract with the Crown Estate, an entity independent of the royal family's personal control. Andrew begins renovations immediately. Royal Lodge needs work. 50 years under the Queen Mother's care preserved its spirit but aged its structure. The house requires modernization, repair, updating for 21st century living. Andrew spends £7.5 million, and reports suggest he exceeds even that substantial sum. The work is comprehensive. Internal alterations to ceilings. Complete exterior repainting. The house shifts from its previous pink tone to white. New tarmac for the gate entrance, modern lighting and security cameras. A conservatory addition approved in 2001. Indoor swimming pool. Updated electrical systems, plumbing, heating. Nina Campbell, the renowned interior designer, works on the interiors. She's given permission to select unused furniture and artwork from both Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle's storage rooms. Priceless pieces emerge from decades in darkness. Paintings, chairs, tables, treasures that transform Royal Lodge's rooms into something genuinely spectacular. Campbell, ever the professional, never publicly criticizes. She describes the Yorks as lovely to work with. But stories circulate. Andrew's stuffed teddy bears arranged on sofas. Specific demands about how rooms should feel, look, function. The renovations stretch across 2003 and into 2004. By the time they're complete, Royal Lodge has been transformed. It's no longer the Queen Mother's cozy sanctuary. It's something grander, more ambitious. A statement property, 30 rooms across the main building, 7 bedrooms. The formal saloon measuring 48 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet, a room designed for entertaining on a royal scale. The original Nash Conservatory, still intact. The Royal Chapel of All Saints in the grounds. 6 lodge cottages for staff. A gardener's cottage. Police security accommodation. All sitting on 98 acres of prime Windsor parkland. Property experts estimate the open market value at £30 million. Some suggest higher, 37 million, 40 million. It's nearly impossible to calculate accurately because properties like this never reach the open market. In 2004, Prince Andrew moves in with his two daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. They're 15 and 14 years old, teenagers navigating the complexities of growing up royal in an age of relentless media scrutiny. Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife, doesn't live there initially. They divorced in 1996 after 10 years of marriage, their relationship destroyed by financial pressures, Sarah's mounting debts, and the corrosive effect of constant tabloid attention. But in 2008, Sarah moves into Royal Lodge with Andrew. This arrangement bewilders observers. Divorced couples don't typically share homes, but Andrew and Sarah maintain they've remained best friends. The 30-room mansion allows them to live separate lives under one roof, their own wings, their own spaces, coming together for family occasions. It's unconventional. It's also, they insist, nobody's business but theirs. For a while this works, Andrew remains a working royal. He serves as special representative for international trade and investment, a role that sees him travel extensively, promoting British business interests abroad. He attends hundreds of engagements annually. He appears at state occasions, family events, ceremonial functions. Royal Lodge functions as his base. His daughters grow up here, marry here. Princess Eugenie's wedding reception in 2018, Princess Beatrice's scaled-down COVID-era ceremony in the chapel in 2020. The house seems settled, permanent. The Duke of York's official residence, destined to remain so for decades. Then comes November 2019 and everything falls apart. November 16th, 2019. BBC Newsnight, interviewer Emily Maitlis. Subject, Prince Andrew's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, the American financier, died by suicide in August 2019 while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. His decades of alleged abuse, his connections to powerful men worldwide, his manipulation of young women, all of it had finally caught up to him. Prince Andrew's association with Epstein had been public knowledge for years. Photographs showed them together. Flight logs documented Andrew's presence on Epstein's private jet. In 2011, after Epstein's first conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor, Andrew was photographed walking with him in New York's Central Park. Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's victims, alleged she was trafficked to Andrew when she was 17. She claimed she was forced to have sexual relations with him on multiple occasions. Andrew denied all allegations vehemently. The Newsnight interview was Andrew's attempt to draw a line under the scandal, to address the allegations directly, explain his friendship with Epstein, and move forward. It becomes one of the most disastrous media appearances in royal history. Andrew claims he couldn't have been at the London nightclub where Giuffre alleges they met because he was at a Pizza Express in Woking with his daughter. He states he couldn't have been sweating during their alleged encounter because a medical condition from the Falklands War meant he didn't sweat. He expresses no sympathy for Epstein's victims, no regret about the friendship, no understanding of how his actions might appear. The hour-long interview is catastrophic. Public reaction is immediate, savage, unforgiving. Every answer makes things worse. Every explanation sounds hollow. 4 days later, November 20th, 2019, Buckingham Palace announces Prince Andrew is stepping back from public duties for the foreseeable future. January 2022, Virginia Giuffre files a civil lawsuit in New York. Andrew denies all allegations. The legal battle is brutal, public, damaging. February 2022, Andrew settles the lawsuit out of court for an undisclosed sum. Reports suggest millions. He admits no liability. The settlement includes a statement that Andrew regrets his association with Epstein and acknowledges the suffering of Epstein's victims. The settlement doesn't end the consequences. Buckingham Palace strips Andrew of his military titles, his royal patronages, his role as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards, honors accumulated over decades of service. He's no longer permitted to use His Royal Highness in any official capacity. He's still technically Duke of York, still Prince Andrew, still eighth in line to the throne, but he's no longer a working royal. No official duties, no public engagements, no income from the sovereign grant, the public funding that supports working royals. And yet, he remains at Royal Lodge, September 8th, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II dies at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. She's 96 years old, having reigned for 70 years. Charles, her eldest son, becomes King Charles III. The new king faces an institution in crisis. Scandals have eroded public trust. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's departure to California, and subsequent revelations in interviews, and Harry's memoir. Andrew's catastrophic fall from grace. Questions about royal finances, about relevance, about whether monarchy still serves any purpose in modern Britain. Charles wants a slimmed-down monarchy, fewer working royals, lower costs, better public accountability, and he wants Andrew out of Royal Lodge. The campaign begins quietly. Private conversations. Suggestions. The king offers Andrew Frogmore Cottage, the smaller 5-bedroom property that was Harry and Meghan's UK residence before they were asked to vacate in 2023. Frogmore Cottage sits within Windsor Castle's secure perimeter. Police protection is included. It's perfectly adequate for a retired royal with no official duties. It's also a significant downgrade from Royal Lodge's 30 rooms and 98 acres. Andrew refuses. The private suggestions become less private. Stories leak to the press. Sources close to the king express concern about Andrew's living situation. The costs become public knowledge. £4 to £5 million annually to maintain Royal Lodge. That's heating, staffing, groundskeeping, security, repairs. Security becomes the pressure point. In late 2023, reports emerged that King Charles has cut funding for Andrew's private security detail at Royal Lodge. The property sits outside Windsor Castle's official security perimeter. Without dedicated protection, it's vulnerable. The message is clear. If Andrew can't afford to maintain Royal Lodge and pay for his own security, he should leave. Andrew refuses. Throughout 2024, the standoff intensifies. British tabloids cover it relentlessly. The siege of Royal Lodge. Headlines speculate on Andrew's finances, on where his money comes from, on how long he can hold out. The Crown Estate reportedly wants Andrew gone. Royal Lodge could be rented at market rates or converted to another use. As long as Andrew occupies it under his 75-year lease, that revenue stream remains blocked, but the lease is ironclad. Andrew paid for £7.5 million in renovations. He holds a legal right to occupy the property until 2078. The Crown Estate cannot simply evict him without cause. Reports claim Andrew has found funding to maintain the property. The sources of this funding remain mysterious. Some suggest he's drawn on inheritance from Queen Elizabeth II. Others hint at foreign money, business deals, loans from wealthy friends. No one provides clear answers. August 2024 reports suggest King Charles has given up trying to evict Andrew. Royal commentators note the king has more pressing concerns: his own cancer diagnosis in February 2024, continuing tensions with Harry, the demands of his new role. But Andrew's situation isn't resolved. It's simply in stalemate. Then, October 30th, 2025, everything escalates dramatically. Buckingham Palace issues a statement that shocks even jaded royal watchers. King Charles III has stripped his brother of his titles. Andrew is no longer Prince Andrew, no longer Duke of York. He's Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, a private citizen with no royal rank, no courtesy titles, no official status within the monarchy. The statement announces Andrew must vacate Royal Lodge. He will relocate to a private residence on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, the king's private property. Constitutional experts call it unprecedented in the royal family's modern history. The first time a prince has been stripped of his title since, well, there's no recent precedent. The monarchy doesn't do this to its own. The justification: ongoing fallout from the Epstein Association. New revelations. Reports claim Andrew remained in contact with Epstein after claiming the relationship ended, including correspondence suggesting they were in this together. The backing is significant. Prince William, now heir to the throne, reportedly supports the decision. Senior royals agree. The royal website strips Andrew's pages, though archived records of his past engagements remain. Sarah Ferguson, now no longer Duchess of York, is also expected to leave Royal Lodge. Reports suggest she might relocate to their daughter's $3.6 million property in Portugal to escape the media storm. The BBC's Question Time, a show featuring live audience reaction to current events, reads out the announcement during filming. The studio audience erupts in applause. Public opinion is clear. Andrew has exhausted whatever goodwill remained. But here's what makes this moment extraordinary. As of mid-November 2025, Andrew is still at Royal Lodge, November 17, 2025. Photographers spot Andrew on horseback in Windsor Great Park. It's his first public sighting since losing his titles. He's riding with a female companion, relaxed, apparently unconcerned by the orders to relocate. Royal sources express frustration. The king won't be happy that his brother has been photographed riding in the grounds of Windsor Castle, which after all is funded by the taxpayer. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, reportedly find it particularly galling. They moved into Forest Lodge, about a mile from Royal Lodge, earlier in the month. Their 3 children attend school nearby. They chose Windsor for stability, for privacy, for the chance to raise George, Charlotte, and Louis away from London's intensity. And now Andrew is their neighbor, defiantly riding through the same parkland their children play in. Multiple sources warn Andrew's relocation to Sandringham could take months. He continues to reside at Royal Lodge with Sarah Ferguson, both apparently waiting out the storm. Why won't he leave? The simplest answer? Because he doesn't have to. His 75-year lease with the Crown Estate remains legally binding. The king cannot simply order him out. The Crown Estate would need to prove Andrew violated lease terms, perhaps through inadequate maintenance, to force his removal. And Andrew has apparently secured funding to maintain the property. Where the £4 to £5 million annually comes from remains murky. But as long as bills are paid, repairs are made, and the lease terms are met, he has legal right to remain. There's also the question of what Andrew has left. Royal commentator Robert Hardman noted in 2024, "Someone said to me the other day, he's got nothing else. He's got no public life. He has no public role. And he's clearly devoted to this home, and he likes being there. Royal Lodge isn't just a house to Andrew. It's identity. It's status. It's the last thing proving he's still royal, still relevant, still a Windsor. Leaving means accepting his fall is complete. Accepting he's truly been cast out by his family, his king, his brother. Moving to a private residence on Sandringham, which sources describe as considerably more modest than Royal Lodge, means admitting defeat, so he stays. He stays because his grandmother loved this house, because he grew up running through these gardens, because he spent £7.5 million of his own money renovating it, because the lease says he can. He stays because leaving feels like surrender, and Prince Andrew has never been particularly good at admitting he was wrong. Stand on the front lawn of Royal Lodge on an autumn morning. Mist rises from the grass. The white Georgian facade glows in early light. Beyond, Windsor Great Park stretches toward ancient woodland. It's achingly beautiful. Turn around, look closer, and you see the cracks, literally. Cracks running down exterior walls, paint peeling in sheets, window frames that need replacing. A property showing its age despite millions spent on renovations 20 years ago. Royal Lodge is dying. Slowly, expensively, inevitably. Here's what most people don't understand about historic properties. They consume resources, constantly, voraciously. They're not houses you simply live in. They're machines that demand feeding, with money, with labor, with constant attention, or they fall apart. Start with heating. The main building spans 30 rooms across 3 stories. Georgian construction means solid walls with minimal insulation. original sash windows, beautiful but thermally inefficient. High ceilings that push hot air upward and away from human spaces. In winter, heating Royal Lodge means running industrial-scale boiler systems, oil or gas. Either way, the costs are astronomical. Thousands of pounds monthly just to maintain comfortable temperatures in a building designed when fuel was cheap and labor was cheaper. Then there's staffing. A property this size cannot function without people. Housekeepers to clean 30 rooms, maintenance staff to handle repairs, gardeners to manage 98 acres, not wild parkland, but cultivated grounds requiring constant care, mowing, pruning, planting, weeding. Professional gardeners command 30 to 40,000 pounds annually. Multiple gardeners mean annual staffing costs easily exceeding 150,000 pounds. Kitchen staff, security personnel, drivers, administrative support. Even with Andrew's reduced circumstances, running Royal Lodge as a private residence requires a household staff of dozens. And that's just routine operations. Then come the capital expenses. The big repairs that properties like this demand every few years. Roof work. Royal Lodge's roof spans that entire Georgian structure. When tiles fail, when flashing deteriorates, when centuries of rain finally penetrate, the repairs run into hundreds of thousands of pounds. Plumbing systems that date back decades. When pipes burst, when drainage fails, when Victorian-era infrastructure finally gives out, the work requires specialists, heritage property contractors who understand historic buildings, who won't simply rip out and replace with modern materials, but will carefully restore using appropriate techniques. Electrical systems that need constant upgrading, fire safety regulations change, insurance requirements increase. What was adequate in 2004 becomes inadequate by 2024. Structural issues. Reports from 2024 describe Royal Lodge as being in shocking condition. Dampness problems, wear and tear becoming dangerous, cracks widening in brickwork, plaster falling from walls, the kind of deterioration that, left unchecked, can make a building uninhabitable. Estate agents who specialize in historic properties estimate Royal Lodge needs approximately £2 million in immediate repairs just to bring it up to acceptable standards. £2 million. After Andrew already spent $7.5 million in the early 2000s. This is the cruel mathematics of owning historic property. It never stops requiring investment. The bigger the house, the faster it deteriorates. The more prestigious the address, the more expensive the necessary materials and contractors. Property experts speaking to British media note the specific challenges. Costs can vary, but hiring experienced gardeners could range from 30 to 40,000 pounds annually per gardener, meaning the total annual maintenance bill could easily exceed 150,000 pounds. This would cover routine tasks like mowing, pruning, planting, and general upkeep to ensure the grounds remain in top condition. And that's just the gardens. Add security, which Andrew now must fund privately, armed guards, surveillance systems, 24/7 monitoring, and costs escalate further. Security for a high-profile residence in a sensitive location could run £1 million or more annually. Total annual cost to maintain Royal Lodge at acceptable standards, £4 to £5 million. £4 to £5 million every single year, not to improve it, not to expand it, simply to keep it from falling into ruin. Where is this money coming from? Prince Andrew's official royal income ended when he stepped back from public duties in 2019. He receives no salary from the sovereign grant, the public funding that supports working royals. He has no government position, no official role providing income. And yet, somehow, Royal Lodge's bills keep getting paid. This is where the story enters murky territory, where public record ends and speculation begins. What we know for certain, Andrew received an annual allowance from Queen Elizabeth II. Reports suggest approximately £1 million yearly. This allowance ceased when she died in September 2022. King Charles III reportedly continued funding Andrew's living expenses and security initially, but cut financial ties in 2024. The decision was described by sources as the king's patience running out when it comes to funding his brother's lifestyle in a way that does not fit his status. Andrew has income from his 22 years of service in the Royal Navy. His military pension, while substantial by ordinary standards, is nowhere near sufficient to maintain a multi-million-pound annual cost lifestyle. So where does the money come from? Possibility 1. Inheritance. Queen Elizabeth II left Andrew money in her will. Royal wills are sealed. They're never made public, but experts speculate she provided significant bequests to all her children. Andrew could be drawing on this inheritance to fund Royal Lodge's costs. But inheritance is finite. Even substantial wealth gets consumed by £4 to £5 million in annual expenses. That math doesn't sustain indefinitely. Possibility 2. Private loans or gifts from wealthy friends. Andrew has cultivated relationships with business people and financiers throughout his career. Some of these relationships have proven controversial. His association with various figures has raised questions about conflicts of interest and judgment. Could wealthy contacts be providing financial support, loans at favorable terms, gifts that allow Andrew to maintain his lifestyle? This possibility alarms royal commentators. As one noted, regarding his finances, his family continues to be concerned as to where, in desperation for new income sources, he is securing funding. In the past, his ill-judged business associations haven't exactly been proper, reflecting poorly upon the monarchy. The concern is legitimate, a non-working royal accepting. Financial support from private individuals creates potential for manipulation, for expectations of favors, for scandals that damage the monarchy's reputation. Possibility 3. Business ventures or investments we don't know about. Andrew could have investments that generate income. Property, stocks, business interests held privately that provide cash flow. But again, generating millions annually from investments requires substantial underlying capital. Where did that capital come from? How is it managed? Why has no credible reporting uncovered these ventures? The mystery deepens because Andrew and Sarah Ferguson are not simply wealthy private citizens. They're former royals. Their finances attract scrutiny. Journalists investigate their income sources. Tax authorities monitor their accounts. Yet no clear picture emerges. What we see instead? Reports of Andrew taking on his own gardening to cut costs, letting staff go, allowing parts of Royal Lodge to deteriorate because repairs are too expensive, and we see him refusing to leave despite apparently being unable to afford what staying actually costs. This contradiction, maintaining an unsustainable lifestyle through unknown means, is what makes Royal Lodge's story so disturbing. It's not just about one man's stubbornness. It's about a system where wealth, status, and royal connection operate in shadows, where normal rules about financial transparency don't seem to apply, where someone can maintain a multi-million-pound property without any clear explanation of how. Here's what we rarely consider when we look at grand estates: the people who actually keep them running. Royal Lodge requires labor, constant, skilled, mostly invisible labor. Groundskeepers who arrive before dawn to mow lawns before anyone's awake, who prune roses in careful patterns, who rake leaves from 98 acres of grounds every autumn, who repair fences, maintain paths, plant seasonal flowers in beds around the property, cleaners who polish 30 rooms worth of floors, who dust furniture, clean windows, vacuum carpets, who maintain bathrooms, kitchens, living spaces to standards appropriate for royal residents or former royal residents, maintenance workers who repair what breaks, plumbers for burst pipes, electricians for failed circuits, contractors for structural work, specialists who understand historic buildings, who know how to work with Georgian architecture, who respect the property's heritage status, kitchen staff, Even with reduced entertaining, someone prepares meals, manages food procurement, maintains industrial-scale kitchen equipment, security personnel. Given Andrew's controversial status, armed protection is essential. Guards who monitor entrances, patrol grounds, watch surveillance feeds, who respond to potential threats, who maintain the security infrastructure that makes living in an exposed property survivable. All these people have names, families, lives beyond Royal Lodge's gates. Their stories, unlike the estate owners who employ them, remain mostly untold. We don't know their wages, though we can estimate from industry standards. We don't know their working conditions, though historic properties often present challenging environments. We don't know how secure their employment is, especially with Andrew's financial situation reportedly precarious. What we do know, there's a long history of staff at Royal Lodge being treated well. The Queen Mother was renowned for her kindness to household employees. She created a culture where people felt valued, where loyalty was reciprocated. Whether Andrew maintains that culture is unknown. But here's the economic reality. Every person employed at Royal Lodge depends on Andrew's ability to pay them. When his finances become uncertain, their livelihoods become uncertain. If Andrew were forced to leave Royal Lodge, or if he couldn't afford to maintain it, what happens to those employees? Do they lose their jobs, transfer to other royal properties, find themselves suddenly unemployed because a prince refused to live within his means? The staffing costs at Royal Lodge represent dozens of families' incomes, mortgages, children's school fees, groceries, health care, all dependent on a single man's determination to hold on to a house he may not be able to afford. This is the human infrastructure behind Royal Lodge's beauty, the invisible machinery that keeps one family living in comfort. And when that machinery fails, when staff aren't paid, when contractors won't work without guarantees, when the whole system starts collapsing, the deterioration accelerates. Buildings need people to survive. Without constant care, they fall apart shockingly fast. By 2024, reports suggest Royal Lodge is showing serious signs of neglect. Paint peeling not because of age, but because nobody's repainting. Gardens growing wild, not for aesthetic choice, but because groundskeepers have been cut. Repairs left undone, not for preference, but because funding isn't there. The house is beginning to fail. Not dramatically, not through fire or storm, but through the quiet attrition of deferred maintenance, of costs cut, of a machine that's been running on empty for too long. By late 2024, Royal Lodge's condition becomes a scandal itself. U.S. Weekly reports the property faces dampness issues and wear and tear ravaging the building. Cracks are becoming worse on the brickwork. Paint peels in visible sheets. Plaster falls from interior walls. The Daily Mail photographs Andrew doing his own gardening, not as a hobby, not for exercise, because he's reportedly letting professional groundskeeping staff go to save money. For a property that once required dozens of gardeners, this is catastrophic. 98 acres cannot be maintained by one aging man with a rake. Gardens that took decades to cultivate can decline into wilderness in months of neglect. Inside, the house tells similar stories. Rooms that haven't been heated properly because fuel costs too much. Damp spreading through walls because proper ventilation requires running expensive mechanical systems. Furniture deteriorating because climate control systems are switched off to save money. King Charles III reportedly orders precious artifacts removed from Royal Lodge due to maintenance and security concerns. The implication is clear. The house is no longer secure enough, well-maintained enough, stable enough to house items of historic value. This is how great houses die, not through dramatic catastrophe, but through slow starvation of resources, through owners who can't or won't fund necessary maintenance, through years of deferred repairs accumulating into structural crises. Andrew apparently fights on multiple fronts simultaneously, against his brother's pressure to leave, against media scrutiny of his finances, against the house itself as it demands investment he can't provide. Reports throughout 2024 describe an increasingly isolated figure. Andrew rarely appears in public. He doesn't attend most family events. The rare photographs show him riding in Windsor Great Park or driving his car through the grounds, activities that don't require money, don't require staff, don't require explanation. Sarah Ferguson, facing her own health challenges, she was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2023 and malignant melanoma in 2024, reportedly considers leaving for Portugal. The constant stress, the media attention, the uncertainty about their living situation, all of it takes a toll. But still, they stay. Through 2024 into 2025, Andrew and Sarah remain at Royal Lodge. The lease remains valid. The bills somehow continue to get paid, though nobody can quite explain how. Then comes October 30th, 2025, and King Charles makes his move. The announcement is unprecedented. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, stripped of titles, stripped of royal status, ordered to vacate Royal Lodge. Constitutional experts scramble to understand the mechanism. How does a monarch remove a prince's title? What precedent exists? What does this mean for royal constitutional law? The answer? There isn't much precedent. This is new territory. Letters patent, the formal legal instrument by which monarchs grant titles and honors, are used to revoke Andrew's titles. His HRH style disappears. His Duke of York title vanishes. Even Prince is stripped away. He remains eighth in line to the throne, that can only be changed by Act of Parliament. But in every other meaningful sense, he's been cast out. The justification: new revelations about continued contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Reports that Andrew implied they were in this together in correspondence after publicly claiming the relationship had ended. The ongoing damage to the monarchy's reputation from his mere presence in the royal fold. The execution has Prince William's backing. Senior royals agree. The Crown has had enough, and the eviction notice for Royal Lodge is served. But here's where the situation becomes fascinating from a legal standpoint. Andrew doesn't have to leave. His lease is with the Crown Estate, not with the monarch personally. The Crown Estate is an independent corporate entity. Charles III, even as king, cannot simply order the Crown Estate to break a legally binding contract. Andrew has paid his upfront £1 million. He's completed the required £7.5 million renovation. He's maintained the property, albeit increasingly poorly, within lease terms. He's paid bills, avoided default, met minimum obligations. Unless the Crown Estate can prove material breach of contract, they can't force him out before 2078. This is the trap Charles set for himself by allowing the 2003 lease to be structured as it was. In trying to provide his brother with security, Queen Elizabeth II and the Crown Estate created a fortress Andrew can now defend. The announcement says Andrew will move to Sandringham. Reports describe a private residence on the King's private estate in Norfolk. But as of mid-November 2025, Andrew is still at Royal Lodge. November 17, 2025, Andrew is photographed riding in Windsor Great Park. He looks relaxed, unbothered, a man who has no intention of leaving anytime soon. The photographs infuriate the royal family. Sources tell the press that King Charles won't be happy seeing his brother still on crown property after being stripped of all titles and honors. Prince William and Catherine, now living at Forest Lodge a mile away, reportedly find the situation intolerable. They move to Windsor for privacy, for their children's well-being. Instead, they're neighbors, with a disgraced family member who refuses to accept his banishment. The media covers every development. Royal sources provide constant updates. The standoff becomes daily news. Behind the scenes, negotiations presumably continue. Lawyers for Andrew, lawyers for the Crown Estate, discussions about lease terms, about what constitutes adequate maintenance, about whether Andrew's funding sources are legitimate. The Crown Estate wants him out. They've wanted him out since at least 2023 when King Charles began his pressure campaign. Royal Lodge represents blocked revenue. If they could rent it commercially, which the NAO report acknowledges isn't really feasible due to security concerns, they would. If they could convert it to another use, they would. But as long as Andrew holds that lease, they're stuck. Multiple sources warn the relocation to Sandringham could take months. Legal experts suggest it might take years. Andrew's lawyers could argue he's met lease obligations, that his removal is motivated by personal family conflict, not legitimate property management concerns. This could become the kind of legal battle that plays out in courts, that sets precedents, that exposes family dysfunction in ways monarchies try desperately to avoid. So they wait. Andrew waits at Royal Lodge, burning through his mysterious funding sources, watching his beloved house deteriorate around him, refusing to surrender. The Crown Estate waits, calculating whether forced eviction is worth the legal and public relations cost. King Charles waits, hoping his brother will accept reality and leave voluntarily, rather than forcing a family crisis into civil court. And Royal Lodge itself waits, empty of most staff, suffering from deferred maintenance, slowly crumbling as the battle over its future wages on. Let's imagine Andrew successfully defends his right to remain at Royal Lodge. The lease holds. The courts refuse to evict him. He maintains funding somehow, through inheritance, through private support, through means that remain legally protected from scrutiny. He stays until his death. That could be 20 years, 30 years. The lease extends to 2078, but more realistically, he stays until health or age makes it impossible. What happens to Royal Lodge during those decades? With Andrew's diminished status, there's no pressure to maintain it to royal standards. No state occasions held there. No royal visitors who must be impressed. No public perception to maintain beyond avoiding complete scandal. The house could decline significantly while remaining technically habitable. Rooms closed off to reduce heating costs. Gardens returned to semi-wild state. Only enough maintenance to prevent structural collapse. Historic properties in Britain are littered with examples. Grand houses that declined over decades as their owners aged, as money ran out, as maintenance became impossible. By the time the property finally changes hands, the restoration costs exceed the property's value. Royal Lodge could follow that trajectory. If Andrew lives there another 20 years without adequate investment, the Crown Estate would inherit a property requiring perhaps 10 to 15 million pounds in restoration work. Money that would never be recouped because Royal Lodge can't be sold commercially, can't be converted easily, exists primarily as an albatross tied to Windsor Great Park. The math is brutal. Better to settle with Andrew now, pay him to leave, buy out his lease, compensate him for his renovation investments, than to allow 2 decades of decline that makes the property worthless. But that would require Andrew to have something the Crown Estate wants to buy. Leverage comes from being willing to walk away. Andrew has demonstrated he won't walk away. So the standoff continues with no obvious resolution. This is what makes Royal Lodge's story different from typical mansion decline narratives. Usually, financial collapse forces abandonment. The owner goes bankrupt, loses the property, walks away. The house sits empty, deteriorates, eventually gets demolished or sold for rescue. But Andrew can't go bankrupt in the traditional sense. His status, his connections, his access to resources beyond normal accounting, all of it means he operates outside conventional financial constraints. He can maintain just enough to avoid eviction while allowing everything else to rot. And Royal Lodge, that beautiful Georgian mansion that was once the Queen Mother's beloved sanctuary, becomes collateral damage in a family war. Stand back from the specific details of Prince Andrew's situation, and Royal Lodge reveals something larger about monarchy in the 21st century. The central contradiction: Royal families claim they operate differently now, more transparent, more accountable, subject to scrutiny like any public institution. But Royal Lodge exposes the lie. Here is a property owned by the Crown Estate, an entity that manages billions in royal property, that claims to operate as a commercial business, that reports to Parliament, and yet it created a lease arrangement that defies commercial logic. A 75-year lease with nominal rent for a property worth tens of millions, granted to the Queen's son without open market competition, justified by security concerns that conveniently prevent any third party from accessing the arrangement's details. When questioned by the National Audit Office, the Crown Estate defended the lease as providing value for money when considering non-financial factors. This is how privilege protects itself. Not through obvious corruption, but through special arrangements justified by special circumstances, through processes that technically follow rules while ensuring only favored parties benefit. Andrew's continued occupation despite being stripped of titles reveals the same contradiction. The monarchy wants to present a modern image, a king willing to discipline his own brother, a family that holds members accountable. But they can't actually remove Andrew because the legal structures protecting royal property also protect royal occupants. The lease was designed to prevent outsiders from challenging royal control. Now it prevents the king from removing an insider who has become an embarrassment. The system protects the system, even when individuals within it become toxic. 4 to 5 million pounds annually to maintain a house one family occupies. A house that provides no economic productivity, that generates no revenue, that exists purely as consumption. Consider what those resources could do elsewhere. Every year spent maintaining Royal Lodge represents salaries for 100 teachers, housing support for hundreds of struggling families, medical treatment for thousands of NHS patients. Instead, it goes toward heating 30 rooms, maintaining 98 acres of ornamental gardens, employing a household staff serving 2 people. The counter-argument goes, royal properties are heritage assets. They preserve history. Their value isn't purely economic. Fine. Then treat them as heritage assets. Open them to the public. Create museums, educational centers, venues that serve broader cultural purposes. Windsor Great Park could sustain a dozen institutions serving public benefit with Royal Lodge's annual budget. But Andrew's occupation prevents that. The house sits there, consuming resources, serving no one beyond 2 residents who contribute nothing to its cost-benefit analysis. This is what historic mansions reveal about wealth. It's not about having enough money. It's about having enough money that you never have to explain costs, never have to justify expenses, never have to choose between beauty and responsibility. Andrew's apparent ability to maintain Royal Lodge, despite having no obvious income source, demonstrates how wealth operates in shadows, how resources flow through channels that don't appear on tax returns or public accounting, how privilege creates its own logic that defies normal economic sense. The house demands millions. Somehow millions appear. Nobody can explain exactly how. And the fact that nobody can explain becomes proof that the system works as intended, to protect elite interests from scrutiny. Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, or rather former Duchess, represents the human cost of Royal Lodge's drama. She divorced Andrew in 1996 after their finances collapsed under crushing debts and constant tabloid harassment. She spent decades rebuilding her life, author, television personality, charity patron. She created identity separate from royalty. Then she moved back into Royal Lodge with Andrew in 2008. By all accounts, they've maintained genuine friendship despite their failed marriage. They share their daughter's joy at their weddings, held at Royal Lodge. They support each other through health crises, her cancer diagnoses, his public disgrace. Now at 65, she faces leaving Royal Lodge while managing serious health conditions. breast cancer treatment in 2023, malignant melanoma diagnosis in 2024. She needs stability, support, reduced stress. Instead, she's trapped in a media circus centered on her ex-husband's refusal to leave a house he apparently can't afford. Reports suggest she might relocate to Portugal, to their daughter Princess Beatrice's property there. Escape the constant scrutiny, find peace. But that means abandoning Andrew, leaving him alone in Royal Lodge as it deteriorates around him, choosing self-preservation over loyalty. There's no good option. Stay and endure endless press speculation about their finances, their relationship, their future. Leave and face accusations of abandoning family during crisis. This is what happens when private family dysfunction intersects with public property and royal status. Normal people facing similar situations can simply move, downsize, make practical choices away from cameras. Royal Lodge won't allow practical choices. Every decision becomes public. Every action gets interpreted through the lens of monarchy, scandal, fall from grace. Sarah Ferguson didn't create this situation. She's collateral damage, but she pays the price in stress, in health impacts, in loss of the home she's lived in for nearly 2 decades. The house consumes more than money. It consumes lives. Here's the uncomfortable truth about Royal Lodge's story. It fascinates us because it confirms what we suspect about privilege. We watch wealthy people fail. We enjoy it. Not from pure malice, but because their failures validate our sense that wealth doesn't protect you from consequences, that even the privileged face limits, that justice exists somewhere in the universe. Prince Andrew's fall is spectacular. From warrior prince, helicopter pilot in the Falklands War, to trade envoy traveling the world, to disgraced figure hiding in a crumbling mansion. The arc is almost Shakespearean, and Royal Lodge becomes the perfect symbol, the beautiful facade, hiding structural rot, the privilege that can't be sustained, the refusal to accept reality until reality becomes undeniable. We watch because we want to see what happens when someone who's had everything loses almost everything, but won't admit it. But here's what we're missing while watching Andrew's humiliation. The system that created this situation hasn't changed. Royal property arrangements still operate in shadows. Crown estate leases still get negotiated privately. Royal finances still avoid the transparency required of public figures in democratic societies. Andrew is the symptom, not the disease. His occupation of Royal Lodge is embarrassing, unsustainable, probably morally indefensible, but it's possible because the structures supporting monarchy in Britain allow such arrangements. Because privilege still creates special rules. Because wealth still operates beyond normal accountability. When Royal Lodge finally changes hands, whether through Andrew's death, forced eviction, or voluntary departure, the underlying systems won't change. The Crown Estate will still grant properties to royals under favorable terms. Questions about royal finances will still go unanswered. The gap between claimed transparency and actual accountability will remain. We're watching one man's decline. We should be examining the institution that made his situation possible. As I write this in late November 2025, Royal Lodge remains occupied by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Sarah Ferguson. The king has stripped his brother's titles, ordered him to leave, made his displeasure absolutely clear, and achieved nothing. The lease holds. The property remains occupied. The standoff continues. Nobody knows how this ends. Scenario 1. Andrew maintains funding somehow and stays until death. The house deteriorates around him. The Crown Estate inherits a property requiring massive restoration. The British public never learns where his money came from. Scenario 2. Financial pressure forces Andrew out within months or years. He negotiates some settlement. The Crown Estate compensates him for renovation investments, buys out his lease, allows him to save face by claiming voluntary departure. He relocates to Sandringham or elsewhere. Royal Lodge undergoes restoration and conversion to some other use. Scenario 3. Legal battle. Andrew refuses to leave. Crown Estate attempts eviction. Courts must determine whether lease terms have been violated. Years of litigation exposing royal family dysfunction. Eventually, a ruling forces resolution one way or another. Scenario 4. Compromise. Andrew remains at Royal Lodge but under modified terms. Reduced property, perhaps just the main house, with grounds open to public use. Financial arrangement that's more transparent. Some face-saving solution that removes him from daily headlines while addressing the Crown Estate's concerns. Nobody knows which scenario unfolds because nobody can predict how long Andrew will fight, what resources he actually has, or what price the royal family will pay to resolve this situation. What we know is this: Royal Lodge has become a symbol of decline, of stubbornness, of privilege, defended past the point of reason. The mansion that once represented royal family warmth, where young Princess Elizabeth played in her miniature cottage, where the Queen Mother created her sanctuary, now represents everything wrong with hereditary privilege in the 21st century. A house one man can't afford but won't abandon. A property consuming millions annually for no public benefit. A family dysfunction playing out in real time with historic property as hostage. Stand at the gates of Royal Lodge today. That white Georgian facade still glows in afternoon light. The grounds still stretch away toward ancient woodland. From a distance, it remains beautiful. But beauty isn't truth, and Royal Lodge's truth is written in peeling paint, spreading cracks, gardens returning to wilderness. This is what happens when houses become identity, when property transforms from shelter into symbol, when letting go feels like admitting you were never really royal at all. Every grand mansion tells this story eventually. The costs mount, the owners age. The math stops working. Most face reality and sell, donate, abandon. They choose survival over symbolism. Royal Lodge reveals what happens when survival isn't the priority, when symbolism matters more than sustainability, when one man's determination to hold on to status creates a slow-motion catastrophe. Prince Andrew believes he deserves Royal Lodge. He grew up there. His grandmother lived there for 50 years. He paid millions to renovate it. The lease guarantees his right to remain. But deserve isn't the question. Sustainability is. Royal Lodge demands £4 to £5 million annually. Andrew has no clear source of that funding. The house deteriorates while he occupies it. Staff are let go. Maintenance is deferred. The property dies while he defends his right to kill it. This is the cruelest mathematics of beautiful places. They outlast us. Royal Lodge will still stand when Andrew is gone, but the condition it's left in will bear permanent marks of his occupation. The years of deferred maintenance will require millions to undo. The next occupants will inherit not a preserved gem, but a restoration project. And for what? So one man could avoid admitting his fall from grace was complete? There's a broader lesson here about monarchy in democratic age, about institutions that claim to serve public good while operating in shadows, about privilege that creates its own logic immune to normal accountability. Royal Lodge should serve Britain as museum, educational center, public park, heritage site. Instead, it serves as private residence for two people who contribute nothing to its astronomical costs and apparently operate beyond normal financial transparency. The house is hostage. The system that allows this is complicit. When Royal Lodge's story finally ends, when Andrew leaves or dies, when the Crown Estate regains control, when restoration begins, we'll call it resolution. But nothing will be resolved. The structures that made this situation possible will remain intact. The next royal will negotiate the next favorable lease. The next scandal will reveal the next gap between claim transparency and actual accountability. Royal Lodge is dying. The monarchy that created this situation will survive it. That's the real lesson. Not about one house or one disgraced prince, but about systems that protect themselves at the cost of everything they claim to value. The beauty is real. The cost is real. And the people who pay the real price are never the ones living in the mansion. Stand at those gates one more time. Look at that Georgian facade, those 98 acres, that history stretching back to 1662. Beautiful, yes. But ask yourself, what is beauty worth when it comes at the cost of truth? Royal Lodge knows the answer. It's written in every crack spreading through its walls, in every room closed off to save heating costs, in every garden returned to wilderness for lack of care. Beauty is worth exactly what you're willing to spend to maintain it. And when the spending finally stops, when reality can no longer be deferred, the beauty fades faster than you'd ever believe possible. This is Royal Lodge's truth. Not the fairy tale of royal grandeur, but the hard mathematics of unsustainable privilege. A mansion eating itself alive while one man refuses to admit what everyone else can see. It's already over. He just won't accept it. And so the house dies. Slowly, expensively, inevitably. The way every beautiful dream dies when the dreamer refuses to wake up.